Español 2, Pretérito, verbos irregulares, parte 1. Now that we have talked about how to conjugate verbs in the regular preterite, we are going to continue with learning how to conjugate verbs in the irregular preterite. But before we get to talking about the verbs in the irregular preterite, let's talk about a little bit of review. Remember that the pretérito is one of the past tenses in Spanish. Now this is really important, this idea of it being one of. It is not the only past tense. In fact, you will learn another past tense next year. Most verbs are regular in the pretérito. That's what makes them regular, is the fact that they are common. So the vast majority of the verbs that you need to conjugate in the pretérito are going to be regular. When you have a regular verb, remember that you're going to take the ending and you are going to take it off of your verb just like we do in the present tense. So you're going to take the AR, the ER, or the IR off of your verb. Then you are going to add your endings. There's one set of endings for AR verbs. Remember, your endings are a, aste, o, amos, astes, aron. Don't forget your accents on the yo form and the AF form. It's really important that you don't forget those because you can confuse people as to the verb tense you're using if you don't remember those accents. ER and IR verbs share a set of endings, and this is different. In the past, sometimes in the present tense, they've been separate, and remember in the future, they all, even AR verbs, use the same set. But in the pretérito, the AR uses one set, and the ER and the IR verbs share a set. So those endings are iste, yo, imos, istes, ieron. And again, don't forget to do those accents. Making sure you remember those accents is very important. So now let's get to the irregular preterite. Some verbs are irregular in the pretérito, just like some verbs are irregular in the present and some verbs are irregular in the futuro simple. These irregular forms have to be memorized. That's what it means to be irregular. All right, is that it doesn't follow the normal pattern. You're going to have to memorize how to use these verbs. There are a few types of irregular verbs in the pretérito. The first type that we're going to go over is those verbs that are completely irregular. This means that they don't just have a spelling change. They don't just have, a change here or there. They're actually a completely separate form. These are verbs where the entire verb must be memorized. There is unfortunately no trick. You just have to memorize the verb. There are 4 verbs of this type that you're going to be required to know. So we're just going to go over those 4 today. There are other types of irregular verbs that we will go through next time. So the first of those verbs is ir. Remembering that ir means to go. So in the past, when we say to go, we say went. So ir in the pretérito is going to mean went. So here are the forms. You already know yo fui. We learned it as vocabulary during our compras unit. The rest of the forms are fuiste, fue, fuimos, fuistes, fueron. It is really important to note that there are absolutely no accents in the irregular preterite. Okay, no accents at all in the irregular preterite. So do not put an accent on these. I just told you don't forget the accents, but only if it is required. So in the regular preterite, you need those accents. In the irregular preterite, there are no accents. The next verb is ser. Ser, of course, means to be, and it is translated as was in the past. So when you're going to use ser in the past, you are going to say was in the pretérito. Now, remember that there are 2 verbs that mean to be. You have ser, and you also have the verb estar. So it is really important to remember that estar is going to be only used when you're talking about location or things that change. Ser is going to be used to talk about things that are more permanent. So estar is different. It's actually in a different set of irregular verbs that we're going to do later. But for ser, the conjugations are fui, fuiste, fue, fuimos, fuistes, and fueron. Again, there are absolutely no accents in the irregular preterite. Now, this might look familiar, and the reason is because ir and ser are exactly the same in the preterito. There is no difference whatsoever. I actually took these slides and just copied them and changed the heading from ir to ser because they are exactly the same. So how are you going to know the difference? Well, you're going to know the difference because of context. It is usually very obvious if you want to say that I went somewhere versus I was. So you're going to have to use the rest of the sentence to determine whether or not you are using ir or ser. The next irregular preterite that we are going to do is the verb ver. Ver means to see, and that would translate as saw in the past. So when you're using ver in the preterito, you are saying saw. Now, you may notice that all of these verbs, they're irregular in Spanish. They are also irregular in English. So I went, I was, I saw. Those are all irregular in English. Because usually in English you would add ed, and we don't say I goed, I beed, or I seed. We say went, was, and saw. So these are irregular in English as well. The forms for ver are vi, viste, vio, vimos, vistes, vieron. And again, no accents if you are using the irregular preterite. And the last of the four verbs that you are going to be required to know of these completely irregular, no trick verbs are dar. Dar means to give, so the past is gave. And again, that's irregular. We don't say gived, we say gave. So the forms of dar are di, diste, dio, dimos, distes, dieron. And once again, no accents. You should not be putting any accents on these. Ver and dar are sister verbs in the preterito. So this is probably looking pretty familiar to what we just did with ver. And that's because all you're doing is changing out the first letter. If it's ver, you use v at the beginning. And if it's dar, you're going to use d at the beginning. So just remember that, and these should be pretty easy to remember. So now it is time to go do some Conjugamos practice.